Welcome to this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms and what will be a special European edition today. My name is TK Kerstetter. I am the CEO of Boardroom Resources and the co-founder and editor-at-large of Corporate Board Member. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the show, and we're going to be filming today from the Conference Board Studios here in New York. And our topic today in this special European edition is going to be how one prepares for the 2019 proxy season. And joining me is somebody that's going to provide us a lot of information and research. Please welcome Aniel Mahabier, who's the CEO of CGLytics. Welcome, Aniel.
Hey TK, thank you for the introduction. Very delighted to be here. Thank you so much.
So the first thing I think we better do is sort of explain to our audience what CGLytics is. So could you take a second and just fill our audience in on that?
Yeah. CGLytics is a data analytics provider specialized and focused wholly on providing corporate governance data. CGLytics provides a global data set, and our focus and aim is to provide the deepest governance data set available in the market. Along with that, CGLytics provides a range of benchmarking and screening tools, allowing corporations, institutional investors to perform at any point of time a governance health check, manage proactively governance risks, and on top of that, perform benchmarks against industry peers, sectors, or a group of other companies at any point of time based on real data.
Well, I've seen your work and I've seen some of the data reports and stuff. Very interesting what you've been able to do so far. And in fact, one of those reports we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the FTSE 100 Proxy Review Report. Specifically, I think it's designed to provide information about 2018 and what boards and companies should be doing to prepare for the next proxy season, which is really upon us. I think when we look at that report, Aniel, could you there's a lot in it, and we'll be telling readers at the end of the show where they can get a copy of this. But how about if we take a second and sort of highlight maybe the three issues that you think are the most important for FTSE 100 European countries to be aware of going into the 2019 proxy season?
Sure. So this is our third consecutive report that we've published for the UK market. We publish proxy review reports across various markets based on the data that we hold. For the UK, the key three themes that I would say that we see constantly coming back but getting more attention as the governance landscape continues to evolve is around board diversity. Director election has been one of the key themes that we saw getting challenges in the UK in the last proxy season. We saw dissent doubling against previous year. Plus, we've seen a lot of focus and scrutiny around CEO pay. It was around the quantum of pay, if pay had the pay plans of the CEO, so the executives of the company had the right performance metrics in place, or if there was the right balance in terms of pay mixture. Another trend that we saw through our data was that there's a lot of focus around if metrics are sustainable and socially responsible. A good example was a company in the FTSE 100, Shell, that got tremendous challenges on the CEO remuneration metrics. And as a result of that, we now see a sustainability and an environmental metric being built into the CEO compensation plan. We've seen wider interest in board effectiveness, and we've seen broader interest in ESG. One of the things that I actually want to quickly highlight is as well, based on the analysis that we've done, when you look at pay for performance and being able to assess and benchmark against peers, we still see through the data that we have that roughly a third of the FTSE 100 companies continues to show misalignment on a 1-year basis and on a 3-year basis. And that's typically what investors will look at when they're assessing pay for performance alignments, or when they're assessing how they should be voting on, say, on pay proposals.
So, I mean, if we look globally, those three issues that you mentioned are pretty standard. Certainly in the U.S., we could follow down those three pretty well in preparation for the proxy season as well. Obviously, there's a big issue from investors globally on making sure that the right people are in the boardroom. Is the European countries having the same issue with diversity that we see in the U.S. In the fact that companies like State Street and others are withholding votes on board members with that respect? Are you seeing the same thing with respect in European countries as well?
Absolutely. Let's not forget that these large institutional investors, they invest outside of the US. So it's a global theme. And specifically what you see there's a tremendous amount of focus on when it comes to board diversity as part of the board refreshment processes. So the focus is around making sure that the board has the right skills in place to ensure that the board can actually execute against the long-term strategy of the company. It's around making sure that there's the right mixture of tenure in the board, so that you can continue provide refreshing ideas in the boardroom as well. We see a lot of push on when it comes to gender diversity, and we expect that will continue based on the data that we've seen in the trends that we've seen in the market. That will continue to be an item and a theme that the investors will focus on. Part of that is driven by the regulatory requirements being put in place, especially in Europe, where you have quotas that the countries will have to meet. So that creates challenges for boards to meet specific requirements in a relatively short time frame. And it's interesting to also see how boards are going to meet those requirements. It will request them to think and act differently and look for supplemental ways to look for those diverse candidates than just going to the traditional path. And I think companies where just like us, where we provide value, is that we can provide new ways to boards, corporations, to find diverse candidates by just casting some of the tools that are available in the market for finding diverse talents.
So you had mentioned this phenomena that happened in the UK with the UK shareholders, and they grew as far as voting against re-electing directors. They voted against 38 companies in 2017, yet that grew to 80 in 2018, mostly related to overboarded directors, okay? Which may not be a surprise when you put quotas on, because maybe some of your best candidates that are of color or gender, maybe got a number of invites, so that they could meet those quotas. But do you think that's, do you see that number continuing to climb, or going to other countries, or what do you sort of see with that, both the overboarding issue and the issue of voting against directors?
Yeah. The answer to that is yes. I do expect that to further climb. It has to do with the root cause is, one is, I think companies have been traditionally building boardrooms in a way where they have a network of candidates. Two is, and that requires now for nomination corporate governance committees to amend basically and adapt in finding new ways to expand and create better diverse boards. I also think that when it comes down to the increasing focus on overboarding, one of the trends that we see is shareholder activism taking a bigger role in the European market as well. You have US activists very much focused now also on the European market. Due to regulatory requirements, it creates some exposure and inefficiencies as well. On the other hand, also you see institutional investors taking a more passive activist role as well, and deploying some of the techniques being deployed by the activists. A lot of those focuses around board refreshment and finding the right board candidate, or proposing the right board candidate to create a better balance within the board, and just go beyond the network that traditionally the Nomination and Corporate Governance Committee would normally draw from.
It's going to be interesting both in the States and across the globe. It'll be an interesting proxy season. And Neil, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to join us. As this world becomes a smaller place, there's going to be more interest on us looking outside the borders of the U.S., and I'm looking forward to the reports that you guys will be producing for all those countries. So thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, TK. It was a real pleasure being here as well.
And that will conclude this edition of Inside America's Boardroom, a special European edition. We'll be back again next week when we take another look at a critical topic that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.